This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Latirzo, former fighter, part-time writer, try to be a full-time observer. I am joined by former six-term president of the Boxing Writers Association of America, Jack Hirsch. Jack, hope you're resting well. It was a nice weekend weather-wise. We got some boxing. I know there's something you want to address right off the bat, but let me just say hello. Nice to see you. Take it away.
Nice to see you, Frank. We'll be banging away in a little while. You know, this is a feeling out first round of you and I, and then we'll be opening up as we go along. But on a sad note, the Morgan's Pale, a lot of people might not have heard of him. Legendary promoter from Denmark, passed away at age 88. He promoted for decades in Denmark, and some of the fighters he promoted were middleweights like Mikkel Kessler, who's actually more super middleweight, Tom Boggs, a middleweight who challenged for the world title, guys from Denmark. He brought to Denmark fighters like Larry Holmes, Michael Spinks, Bob Forsten, Emil Griffith, and he's the only person from Denmark who's ever been inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. That was way back, I think, 2008. And Morgan's Pale, just a legendary name in his neck of the woods over there. And he meant so much to boxing, you know, in his patch in Denmark. And we give our condolences to his family and the boxing world in general.
I knew the name, Jack. I never met him. I saw a lot of the accolades on social media. So it's nice that you bring him up and you mention him. Okay. This weekend, we didn't have a whole lot. We're coming out of seeing a lot the last couple of weeks. There's been talk of some fights. There's a big fight down the road in 2 weeks, but let's just start off on the ESPN card, Jack. We saw two guys that they don't, in the big spot, they don't really excel, but they're better than gatekeepers. And that was the Pedraza Comey fight. Fight was called a draw. They left the ring probably satisfied, both guys, that it was a draw. It was fought at 140 in Oklahoma. They both hoped they wanted to take that next step to get another title shot. They both performed pretty well, Jack. I think they gave the fans a good fight. Competitive for 10 rounds on national TV. Both former title holders. May have some more opportunities down the road and maybe have a shot at getting a belt, although 135 and 140 are pretty crowded. So I don't know who's going to be the one to step up. There's even talk of them fighting again. They both lost to the bigger name fighters. We know there are the Lomachenkos, the Lopez's.
Lomachenko outpointed both of them widely,
right.
But they were competitive. They hung in there. They weren't outclassed, even though they were both beaten lopsided.
Right. And in the beginning, Jack, it looked like that Comey was going to take the fight. Has a long jab, a hard right hand. He got out to the early lead, but Pedraza basically tracked him down, and he finished stronger. A lot of people had him up 96, I think 94, or 6 rounds to 4. That's kind of how I saw it. But what I like about it is, Jack, both guys live to fight another day. I see our buddy Joe Bergman had it 96, 94. That's pretty much how I saw it. Now, look, on the undercard, there were 2 heavyweight fights by 2 up-and-coming guys. Richard Torres and Jared, the current big baby, Anderson.
Jared Anderson, Frank.
Jack, you know something? I do think a lot of Jared Anderson. I think he's gifted. He's only had 12 fights. I know he hasn't been in real tough, but he shows you everything you want to see. He can switch. He can box. He has power. He went to the body really good. He has a tremendous jab. I mean, Jack, what I saw the other night, even based against a limited guy, I think he could probably hang with anybody in the top 5, and maybe a year and a half down the.
Does he have to step up? An example, last week our featured fight was George Foreman against Chuck Wepner. It was Foreman's 4th pro fight, and he was a pro for less than 2 months.
Right.
I mean, so what's the deal with Jared Anderson? Because I'm tired, Frank, of hearing about all his great potential. I just don't want to hear about his potential anymore. I want to see him in with a guy who's a threat.
Well, Jack, we're going to preview a fight a little later in Luis Ortiz and Andy
Ruiz.
Andy Ruiz. I was thinking John Ruiz for a second.
Okay.
Andy Ruiz.
Andy Ruiz, he doesn't get in shape. He's supposed to be in shape for this fight.
So there's talk that Jared Anderson is going to fight the winner. Anderson had he had a so-so guy in front of him in Micro. Wow. I'm so bad with these foreign named guys.
Frank, but I don't see Jared Anderson fighting the winner so easily because Andy Ruiz and Luis Ortiz are basically promoted by Al Heyman's PBC. Jared Anderson is promoted by Bob Arum's Top Rank. So it's not going to be an easy fight to make. It'll be difficult. Possibly it could be made, but I really don't see it.
Well, if Usyk and Fury fight, that ties up basically the heavyweight title. So there's probably going to have to be some box offs. So it may happen. But there was another fight, Jack, on the undercard. And it was Richard Torres, an Olympian, against Marco Antonio Cando. And the fight ended in like 40 seconds. Jack, it was a mismatch if there ever was one. You could tell by looking at Cando warm up. You could just tell he was a limited guy. We've seen this before. He was knocked down. He was hit on the way down. The referee did a terrible job. And then in the end, he took 3 brutal shots. And look, I know we see those mismatches on the way up, but I think this one was easy to see. And I really had a hard time. My problem is with the commentary and one Joe Tessitore, Jack. He made it seem as if Torres was Marciano and Cando was Walcott. And what we saw was something special. It was not special. It was definitely foreseen that this fight was going to be a mismatch. And then the guy's going on about how sensational it is what we just saw. Jack, the guy, Cando's still laying on the canvas, and for a minute there, it looked like it was touch and go. The guy was in bad shape. Now, he left the ring, went to the hospital, and got a good bill of health. But, Jack, you know what? The commentary in boxing today between the made-up vernacular and the over-the-top announcing. I mean, you and I came up on Don Dumphy. We didn't see any of that. What made Don Dumphy great, Jack, is he knew when to speak, and he assumed that the viewer had a clue what they were watching. I can't hear you, Jack.
I'm sorry. The first fight between Nino Benvenuti and Emil Griffith, Don Dumphy broadcast that fight, and it was controversy. He was criticized for not making it exciting enough, more exciting than it was. And even though Benvenuti pulled off a sensational upset victory and became a star, the first fight itself, outside of the couple of knockdowns,
it was sloppy.
Unbalanced, wasn't really an exciting fight. And Don Dumphy said, I'm not going to fake a fight call. Okay? Now, the broadcasters we have around today, I'm not going to start knocking Tessitore, Andre Ward, Timmy Bradley, but you do get a sense that broadcasters in large part are beholden to the promoters. Now at ESPN, Top Rank, Bob Arum, they wield a lot of power there. If they're completely fed up with a certain broadcaster, it becomes a little harder for that broadcaster to survive unless he has a contract. I mean, a lot of people miss Teddy Atlas then, and I love Teddy Atlas listening to him. But sometimes, there has to be a chemistry with the executives as well. And that plays a role into who they decide, who they're.
I think Teddy was too honest, Jack, and I think that's why he's not there.
Yeah, listen, Teddy was my favorite. Okay, I wish Teddy was still there. So let me be upfront about it. But the thing with Teddy is he had to be the man. If you paired him with someone else, Teddy always had to be the main guy. Like an example, you and I have a show like this. We go back and forth. It's 50-50.
Right.
Sometimes you have the upper hand in giving your opinions. Sometimes I do. But it's a healthy back and forth most of the time. I guess like 99% of the time. Really 100. But if Teddy was doing this show with one of us, we would probably have to defer to Teddy a little more. We'd have to watch ourselves, like Teddy, you're the ultimate expert and we're the backup, that type of
I
thing.
would never go with that, but you're right. We'd have to do that, but I would have a hard time with that.
That's Teddy's personality. But with that said, you're not going to get a more knowledgeable guy than Teddy. I've learned a lot from Teddy over the years. That's why I love listening to Teddy. And it broke my heart, ESPN moving on from Teddy. And what was any of it Teddy's fault or not? Sometimes you're in a position of real power, the network, and you might think you're above it in a way deep down, but no one is. I mean, ESPN has a broadcaster now, Stephen A. Smith. To Stephen A. Smith's way of thinking, he might feel I'm so powerful, ESPN's not going to let me go if I make a mistake. But no one is irreplaceable. ESPN could one day say, we're tired of Stephen A., we're moving on. Okay, but Joe Bergman makes the thing. Teddy was too honest, and that doesn't fit the network's best interests.
Jack, before you go to Joe Bergman, and I agree with Joe, but Joey Melrose he must have read my mind because he said Bradley tries to copy Atlas. Yeah. And I agree with that. I actually think that Atlas's influence over Bradley actually ruined him. And what amazes me is Bradley was a two-weight champion. Fought Manny Pacquiao 3 times. I'm sorry, Teddy Atlas is a very knowledgeable guy, but he never fought at that level. And he can talk about firemen and putting the fire out and running to the fire and going through the front door and all the things he said. If I'm Timothy Bradley and I'm a 2-time legitimate world champ, I am not going to be the doormat for Teddy Atlas. I don't care. And I really do think that Bradley, because I think he had some insecurities to a degree, I do think he goes over the top trying to show how smart he is, how insightful he is. He tries to show up Andre Ward to a degree. And I do think that Atlas's influence on Bradley hurt him. But what we liked about Teddy, Jack, you nailed it. Look, I'm good at breaking fights down. A lot of times, Teddy said a lot of things on the air that I was thinking, and he could get into the fighter's mind and know the mindset. And I miss that regarding him doing the fights. But this cast they have now, and Jack, look, you're a baseball guy much more than me. And we both know in baseball, they have changed the language so much in baseball compared to what it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I really do think it's their way of trying to bring in the younger fans and get the technology into it and try to make it sometimes more sophisticated than it really is.
It's funny you mentioned baseball. And that brought a smile to my face. A lot of times for fun, I like to compare fighters to baseball players, who would be who in their sport. And I have a lot of fun with it. I think of Derek Jeter. I think of Bernard Hopkins. Okay? A spotlight fighter. We won't talk about him now. I think of Donald Curry at his best. I think of Don Mattingly. That type of career. And I think of Teddy Atlas, Frank, I think of Billy Martin. Martin was a genius.
That's a good. I like it. I like it.
Teddy was a genius.
I like it.
Teddy is so darn smart. I love hearing what Teddy has to say, but you also have to fit into this, the team element that they put out there for you. And obviously Teddy was upset with, certain of the things that were going on at ESPN, and he would maybe speak his mind. If a promoter was putting on a fight he didn't like, kudos to Teddy for speaking his mind. But listen, we got Bradley, we got Ward, we got Tessitore. I'm not about to knock them, even though I miss Teddy a great deal.
Jack, what's funny? And I've seen a lot of guys since the fight Saturday night talk about, like, do we miss HBO? Yeah, I kind of miss HBO. Lampley was over the top, but I did like to hear Larry Merchant's breakdown of the fights and the color guys they had. They had Foreman, Roy Jones, Sugar Ray Leonard, Manny Stewart. They were really good. But let me tell you a quick story, since we have time to cover this. And it has to do with knowledgeable guys. Jack, when I used to train at Frazier's Gym, there would be a bunch of guys in the back of the gym. And I mean older guys, retired guys, maybe they even lived on the street. But you could go up to them and they could tell you who boxed who in every gym in Philadelphia. And every once in a while, they would come up to me when I would leave the gym. Now, look, I was one of the only white guys there, along with Tex Cobb. And they would come up to me and they would say, I know George Benton trained you, but you ought to try this and do that. And Jack, I was always courteous to them and I listened to them. But in my immature mind, I used to think to myself, well, if they were so smart and they knew so much, how come they're not training fighters who are fighting for big money on national TV? And then as I got older, I realized that, Jack, some of the most insightful friends I have who, if I'm on the fence about picking a fight, pick who's going to win, I will call a couple of my buddies that never boxed and never went to the gym, and they're insightful, and maybe they'll see something or say something to push me over. So the point is, the story is, everybody's life takes different turns. And just because somebody never fought, it doesn't mean they don't know what they're talking about. Now, look, it helps. And I just used Bradley as an example why I wouldn't bow down to Teddy. But it's like that, Jack, I always took that with me. It's like I never took their advice. And when I look back now and I remember some of the things the guy said, and because George Benton didn't say it, Jack, shame on me for not paying more attention to it.
Yeah, no, I listen, I agree. Or what Emmanuel Stewart used to say, if someone has watched enough boxing matches, that's their classroom, really, where they're learning. He told me that about Larry Merchant. He said, Larry's watched a lot of fights. He knows boxing because he's watched a lot of fights. Now, I always like Merchant's commentary. I didn't necessarily consider him the most knowledgeable guy, but he was entertaining. He was insightful. He was a great interviewer. Merchant was the best in-the-ring interview I ever heard. I mean, Jim Gray's not bad. Some people find Jim Gray to be obnoxious. I don't think he's bad. Jim Gray's trying to get to the point, get a reaction. But I always thought Merchant was the best, conducting an interview in the ring. But listen, we all have our favorites. You mentioned Don Dunphy before. I used to like Howard Cosell, and people would despise Howard Cosell. Howard Cosell was entertaining, but in a fair way, like, down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier. That was entertaining and true, and it was factual. But I'll admit, he'd lose me with things like in the '84 Olympics. He'd talk about the speed jab. The speed jab? What the heck is a speed jab? Now we're hearing the check left hook in this era,
Jack, I just saw what Joey Melrose said again, and he does make another good point. The fact that Teddy Atlas would have to answer to Stephen A. is a joke. And we both know
What
why.
what is
And
the answer to Stephen A?
I'm going to tell you why, Jack. And it might not be comfortable for some people to hear, but I believe the fact that people look at Stephen A and assume because he knows Mayweather, because he knows Hopkins, and because he's black, they think he knows a lot about boxing. But that's not the case. And that's a joke. The fact that Stephen A could actually put Teddy Atlas on the hot stove. That is a joke. We've heard Stephen A's commentary, Jack. He is embarrassing when he talks about boxing or MMA. He's actually a joke. I want to hear, you know what? I don't really listen to Stephen A, but if he has something to say about the NBA and he's going to tell me that, maybe LeBron is better than Kevin Durant or vice versa, I'll listen to that. But please don't tell me about boxing. And Teddy reminded me of, Jack, and this guy had problems too because he was honest. Jerry Quarry doing commentary.
What happened with Jerry Quarry? Great point. Okay, Jerry Quarry, but it wasn't the commentary that got Quarry in trouble. He was a great analyst, one of the best I ever heard, hands down. I mean,
because he was honest.
No, you forgot what happened. He was working for CBS. Okay.
And he fought on ABC, the non-fight.
But he fought for Don King on ABC. And Jerry Quarry felt at the time that Bob Arum was dictating to CBS. And CBS couldn't have been too thrilled that their broadcaster is fighting for ABC. Had he been fighting for their network, CBS, that would have been another.
And think about this, Jack. For like $25,000 is why he went to ABC. They paid him more money. But Jerry Quarry, like Teddy Atlas, or I should say Atlas like Quarry, would say, look, this guy can't fight. Quarry had no problem saying that. It's like, I don't know how Howard Smith went down from that right hand because that was not a big shot.
It was funny. I don't know whether you knew. I think you knew Tom Brookshire. He was from your neck of the woods, Philadelphia. But Tom Brookshire was a football guy who did boxing. He didn't know boxing, but he was a good broadcaster. But that's why I'm not against Stephen A doing things like that. And what happened with Tom Brookshire? He was doing a fight with Jerry Quarry. And there were 2 knockdowns in separate rounds. And it was a new round. And Tom Brookshire said, one more knockdown and this fight is over, meaning the 3 knockdown rule. And Jerry Quarry said, it's 3 knockdowns in 1 round, Tommy. You know what I mean? And Tom Brookshire went, oh, yeah. He didn't.
Tom Brookshire and Jerry Quarry were very, very good friends. And like you said, Brookshire was a football guy, but he was really good friends with Joe Frazier because they were 2 of the bigger stars in Philadelphia at the time. And he loved Jerry Quarry. One night we'll talk about that. He told me some great Quarry stories, Jack. He loved Jerry Quarry, but I love Jerry as a broadcaster, and I love his honesty, and that's all that we want. And back to where we started, Tessitore making a big deal out of the knockout the other night. Like, we've never seen this before. But, Jack, it's just not boxing announcers. I think they do that in all the major sports. They want the viewer to think what we're seeing now we've never seen before. And us being a little older and we've been around, we kind of had seen it before.
Broadcasters do influence how people score fights. I constantly find myself battling against the broadcasters. I see one guy land a punch. They tell me the other guy landed a punch. And I'm fighting with them in my head. I'm saying, no, he didn't land a punch. His opponent landed the punch. And sometimes both guys are connecting basically at the same time, close to it. And they're going to, be a little more gung-ho about one guy more than the other. And you have to be able to separate. It's like you're battling against them. And it's easy to say, well, keep the sound off and that's going to solve the problem. But if you're watching on TV, you want to know about cuts, things that are going on, that you're not, that you're not a ringside and you can't hear about. But listen, we have a heavyweight fight this weekend. An old war horse against a former champion, and I don't know what to make out of him. Luis Ortiz against Andy Ruiz. What's your take on that fight, Frank? You're definitely going to get it.
No, I don't know, Jack. It's $75.
I'm not addicted to pay-per-view. Frank, you are addicted. You're like the guy who's going to give up the bad habit, and you keep talking about it. Yeah, better yet, you're like the fighter who says, I'm only going to fight one more year, then I'm retiring. I'm not going to hang around like these other guys. 14 years later, you're still in the ring.
Well, Jack, we'll see when we talk next. We'll see how it goes. But right now, I don't plan to see the fight. But here's what I think. I think Ortiz is shot. I think he looked awful against Charles Martin, who's a guy who wouldn't have even been a sparring partner for Ortiz 5 years ago. The other side of that is Ruiz is lazy, and he looked bad against Arreola. I was surprised when he got dropped. But I think he knows he needs to win this one. I think he'll either box to a decision, or you might even see what happens if he hits Ortiz on the chin. I hate saying this because I think Ortiz at their best was a better fighter, but I'm thinking at this stage, Ortiz's age, chin, and legs might fail him. So I'm going to give the edge to Ruiz. I wouldn't bet on the fight, but if I have to pick a winner, I'm going to go with Ruiz.
Oh, I would bet on the fight if I got proper odds. I definitely like Ruiz. Last New Year's Day, I was at ringside in Hollywood, Florida, to see Ortiz rally and stop
against Charles Martin.
It was a fight he was knocked down. Yeah, you got that too. You saw that fight as well, Frank.
That was only $49 or $39. That was an easy one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they gave you some value on the undercard there, but the point about it is we both agree Ortiz looked terrible. Now, I'm not a believer. I'm not sure whether you are or not, whether we ever discussed this. I'm not a believer that the last thing a fighter loses is his punch, because in a lot of cases, it's one of the first things he loses. But in Ortiz's case,
I agree with you, Jack.
He still got the wallop. You could sense that's about the only thing he could do at this point. And can Ortiz win enough rounds against Ruiz to win a decision? I doubt it based on how he looked against Charles Martin.
Yeah, I don't trust his legs.
You said something that was very revealing that expands the heavyweight division a little while ago. You said 5 years ago, Charles Martin couldn't have been a sparring partner for Ortiz. You said something like that a little while ago.
Right.
5 years ago, somewhere close to it, Charles Martin was gift wrapped the IBF heavyweight title. And that's why Anthony Joshua, who was a raw heavyweight, who was at least a couple of years away from even thinking about fighting for the title, Charles
iced him in 2 rounds.
Champion, he called out Anthony Joshua because he knew it was a payday. Eddie Hearn out of nowhere said, I can't believe it. They're giving us a title match just as a sure thing. And Charles Martin wasn't in Joshua's league. He's not an elite heavyweight. He's a little better than average heavyweight, or let's put it another way. Let's I don't want to insult Charles Martin. Let's say he's good. Let's say he's maybe a top 20 heavyweight in the world.
Right. He's limited.
Yeah, okay.
At the elite level.
But he's not gonna he can't stay with the elite heavyweights. And I don't want to hear Luis Ortiz is elite. In his prime, you could argue Ortiz was elite based on the 2 Deontay Wilder fights, especially the first one. He gave Wilder all the handle, and Wilder's big punch eventually broke through late in the fight. And then in the rematch, strangely, Ortiz was completely outboxing him, and it was one punch. But Ortiz is limited here. Ruiz, I don't like Ruiz. I'm going to tell you what I don't like about him, Frank. I think he's truly in this for the money, not for the glory at all. And he wins his title against Joshua. He kind of cashes in.
Right.
I mean, after winning the first fight, he knew what he was guaranteed the second fight. He didn't train he pulled a Buster Douglas on us, like with Holyfield.
He don't have it here.
No, he doesn't have it. This is a chance maybe for him. If you win this fight, you get another big payday next. So that would be his motivation. And if he does get the other big payday, I anticipate once the contract's signed, he doesn't show up in shape.
He'll never have a title again. I agree. Never hold a title again.
There was more a case of Joshua's weaknesses, just getting an equilibrium punch, maybe not having the greatest chin, maybe mentally not being there, whatever the reason was. He cashed in against Joshua. And the funny thing, Joshua that night, he lost to Ruiz, was supposed to fight Jarrell Miller, Big Baby. Jarrell Miller. I had predicted and wrote a story, went online, why Big Baby was going to upset Joshua and stop him.
I thought he was a live dog too, Jack.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think that was a reach at all.
Well, to everyone it was, but you and I, okay? Because no one was going that route. But the funny thing about it is, had Big Baby not had that drug suspension and he'd been in there, he would have been moving forward on Joshua the whole time. So either Joshua would have to knock him out. I think Big Baby would have did what Andy Ruiz did. And we would have looked like geniuses, Frank.
It's funny. You look at Joshua. Joshua still has the best resume and has defeated the best guys in totality.
You got to get kudos. Wait,
what
Frank,
that?
You got to stand up and applaud for Joshua. He wants to return to the ring immediately.
Yes.
After the devastating loss. I shouldn't say it wasn't the devastating as far as what went on inside the ring mentally, because he really wanted to win so bad. Kudos to him, but Usyk was just a little better. So kudos to Joshua. He has said he wanted to fight November. Hearn says, no, we have a December date for you. But the idea he's getting back in the ring 4 months later, wouldn't that tick you off, Frank, if Joshua fights before Terence Crawford fights? Crawford fought last November.
I know, Jack. I'm looking bad on that prediction. I'll tell you that. I think my window is closing.
It still could happen, but
not looking good. But Jack, we'll hit that in a second. But
let's leave those guys alone. Crawford, Spence. Let's forget about them. I'm sick of it.
You're right. I won't post or talk about them. But again, it looks like I'm probably wrong. But back to Joshua. Jack, this is what I think is going on with Anthony Joshua. I really do believe that since the fight, since his outburst immediately afterwards, I really do believe that he has gone through some turmoil and he's trying to make it a positive, because I think in his mind he realizes that fight was only 5-4 Usyk after 9 rounds. And I think he realizes that Usyk bit down and stepped up. And that was the difference in the fight. And when the fight was there to win, Usyk raised his game and Joshua didn't. And I think when he goes to bed at night now, I think he really fights for himself about that, because let's face it, Usyk won the fight 8-4. But after 9 rounds, that fight was anybody's fight. Usyk took it down. He reached back. He showed that he has the DNA of what the greats have. And Joshua showed that he has the DNA of the near greats. So to piggyback off of what you said, I do like that Anthony Joshua is getting back in the ring, pretty soon after that.
Frank, and he might even be thinking in his head, it was a very close fight. He's not saying it, but he's probably thinking of it because one judge scored Joshua the winner, even though we know that was a ludicrous scorecard by Glenn Feldman. And Joshua doubtless has a few people here and there approaching him and say, Anthony, I thought a draw would have been a fair fight. It was very close. It could have gone either way. And Joshua's thinking, it's his own way of thinking. He's probably thinking, yeah, I was winning at the end of 9 rounds. Usyk came on. I think Usyk edged me out maybe. But, I'm okay to lose a very
Jack, a couple of the 8 rounds that Usyk won were very close. A little bit more by Joshua, and it might have tilted the fight, and I think he knows that.
let's talk about our spotlight fight of the week, which
Jack,
we already spotlight a fight, which wasn't close at all.
Let's do that, but let's touch on one more thing since we're on the heavyweights that you wanted to talk about. Deontay Wilder is fighting Robert Helenius in October.
Wilder through the escape Wilder. Yeah, they're having a press conference tomorrow, Frank. Deontay Wilder, Robert Helenius. You like to talk about the mental aspects, as certainly as Teddy Atlas, who we mentioned before. You kind of wonder Wilder's head where it's at. I get the feeling he's maybe has a clear mind. Look, he lost to Fury, but he fought a terrific fight. He gave it everything he had in the ring. So if his confidence wasn't damaged in the second Fury fight, why would it be damaged in the third Fury fight where he did better and actually came close to winning at one point, knocked Fury down twice? But I think Wilder, for all his power, is limited. He's fighting a big, tall guy in Robert Helenius, who I think is decent defensively, could lay back. And I'm coming up with an early prediction, Frank. Normally, I'll say, let's wait. I need to analyze it more. I'm going to call it Wilder by a clear decision. Winning just about every round. Wilder on points. I don't think he knocks Helenius down, but he wins like 118, 110, by a big margin.
Jack, I think it's a perfect fight for both of them, and here's why. For Helenius, he's getting Wilder at the right time, coming off a stoppage loss in a fight where he took a lot of punishment in a big way. And I think that we don't know for sure what Wilder has left, okay? So I think Helenius is getting Wilder at the right time. Conversely, I think that Helenius is a great opponent for Wilder because he will come forward. He's hittable. He's a big target, and we know Wilder can punch. So I think the fight makes great sense for both guys. Wilder, we don't know what he has left. Helenius is getting him at the time that he's coming off 2 consecutive losses, and he was stopped in both of them. So we don't know what he has left coming off a brutal fight. Where Wilder, if you had to pick a guy stylistically who I would match him with coming off a tough fight, it would be a guy who's right there, who he's not going to have trouble finding and hitting.
Well, Helenius' last 2 fights, when he stopped Adam Konaki, small heavyweight, okay, small Polish heavyweight, resides in New York, who had a lot of momentum going, who would work nonstop throughout his fights. He overwhelmed Charles Martin, and it was a competitive fight at the bar.
Right.
Konaki won clearly, and Helenius was bigger, but this was a different opponent because Wilder is long and rangy, as is Helenius. But back to our spotlight fight, Frank. It's interesting. Since in the history of boxing, it's hard to think of when a superstar fighter got upset in a fight and came back with a vengeance to knock his opponent out in one round. The obvious is Louis Schmeling. But since Louis Schmeling, I can only think of one off the top of my head where a guy got his revenge in one round, and that was, in 1997, August 1997, when Roy Jones Jr. had the rematch with Montel Griffin and knocked him out in a round. But unlike Louis Schmeling, Griffin beat Jones by disqualification in their first fight. But it doesn't take away from Montel Griffin having a lot of success against Jones for a number of rounds till Jones started to assert control and knock Griffin down and then hit him when he was low. Give me a take on both fights, but especially the rematch where Jones blitzed him in one round in Connecticut.
Jack, the first fight, Montel Griffin's crouching style and coming in low really had Roy flustered. And a lot of the lead shots that he would hit other guys with who were more upright were missing going over his head, and then Griffin was smartly throwing jabs to the body and pushing Roy back. But by the end of the fight, as we saw, Roy had solved the style and was coming on. And I think out of frustration when he dropped him, he hit him 2 times and was disqualified, as he should have been. In the rematch, again, I think Schmeling is a good example. Louis Schmeling, where a guy was on a mission and said, I'm going to adjust my style. And what did Roy do? Instead of waiting on Griffin like he did the first time, he went right at him, came under with his uppercuts and his hooks, and just blitzed him and showed, like he said, I'm still the man. You can beat me, but don't steal it from me. And he felt the first fight was stolen from him. And that was probably one of the most motivated that we ever saw Roy. And what can I tell you? I was at the first fight. I was shocked seeing the great Roy Jones, who went in undefeated. And here's Montel Griffin, also undefeated at the time, and extends him 9 rounds. And then Roy showed up, and there was never a doubt in my mind. I didn't think 1 round, but there was never a doubt in my mind that Roy was going to take him apart.
I want to ask you an interesting boxing question that never comes up at all, Frank. We hear the referee always say, protect yourself at all times. And that's every fighter has to know that. There was a case recently. There was a case even in the Floyd Mayweather fight with Victor Ortiz. Ortiz tried to hug him a couple of times, and Mayweather, cold cocked
smartly did what he did.
Right. But I'm giving an example. A lot of times we see fighters hug before the last round. Technically, the opponent could haul off and hit him with a left hook and knock him out. And if they do that, the opponent is doing something within the rules. It's not sportsmanlike, no. But if you take the attitude, I'll do anything to win, that's within the rules, not cheating. Okay? Technically, you're not cheating. Morality-wise, it's wrong, but it is within the rules. Now, but what happens when the fighter's knocked down the way Griffin was? Jones hits him when he was down. And my feeling is Montel Griffin faked it, okay?
I think he ad-libbed. I agree.
But that's another issue altogether. Even if he didn't fake it, aren't you supposed to be protecting yourself even at that moment? You're on the canvas. The fight's still going on. If the opponent hits you there, the opponent should lose a point, and you should be given time to recover, kind of like a low blow. You're too dazed if you're knocked down.
Jack,
what is the criteria in a sense?
Jack, remember though, Roy hit him twice, but remember, Roy didn't really knock Montel down in that spot. He was being overwhelmed, and I think Griffin took the knee to buy himself time and said, okay, I'll take the knockdown to regroup so I can finish this round and come out and start over. And then Roy hit him twice, and that was the end. But Griffin felt safe when he took the knee and said, okay, he's hitting me. He's getting the better of me. I'm still coherent enough to know if I take a knee, he has to stop hitting me, and Roy didn't.
That's an interesting story. The great referee, Arthur McCanty Sr., he had refereed the Mike Tyson-Tony Tubbs fight. In the second round, Tyson knocks Tubbs down. The fight took place in Japan. He throws an uppercut that misses. McCanty told me, at the time, I'm interviewing him, had Tyson connected with that uppercut, he would have disqualified Tyson.
Wow.
Hitting a defenseless opponent. Now, whether he would have done it or not, I doubt if it would have went through, because let's fast forward. McCanty refereed the Riddick Bowe Buster Mathis Jr. fight where Bowe hit Mathis when he was down. And what did they call it?
He didn't disqualify him.
No contest. Yeah, I mean, I don't care how great a referee you are. Sometimes they're different sets of rules if you're dealing with a mega star. But with that said, Jones did get disqualified. He was a major star in Atlantic City. I don't think he ever came back to Atlantic City, to Jersey, after that happened.
I'm not sure of that, Jack. I don't want to get off the fight, but real quick,
Yeah.
Tony Tubbs in that fight you're talking about, he fought one of the best first rounds anybody ever fought against Tyson before he got iced in the second. So I just wanted to get that out. But again,
He took it to Tyson. He met him and fought him. He didn't move away.
and remember, he could have gained another $100,000 if he would have came in under 230, and I think he was 238.
Yeah.
But-
I wasn't aware of that. Frank.
But Roy was on a mission in this fight, Jack. Though our highlight fight, he had to beat Griffin, who was a guy that has some good names on his record. I mean, Griffin beat Tony. He has the win over Jones.
Decisions he should not have gotten against James Toney. I thought Tony.
Yeah, Tony was on a couple. Resulted in a couple of those fights. He was on the wrong end, but then he got to get against Tiberi. However, Roy was on a mission, and he had to even that score up and straighten it out. So he showed what he was, and him and Griffin are two different levels.
There are certain levels. I'm just taking a look here. I don't want to spend much time on sneak shots, Mayweather Ortiz, but what had happened, Ortiz had it coming to him. Mayweather hugged him one time, that's that. We got a fight, and Ortiz kept wanting to hug Mayweather.
Then he headbutted him.
Yeah, how is Mayweather supposed to know that Ortiz won't try to sneak a shot in? You know what? Ortiz had it coming to him, I thought. He went a little overboard being extra nice,
Right.
That was my opinion. Emmanuel Stewart disagreed. He thought it was kind of like a cheap shot by Mayweather.
Jack, I know this much. When we see a cheap shot in the ring, it's not by accident. Jerry Quarry hit Joe Frazier low in their second fight. I believe that was an accident. But what we saw with Mayweather and in a couple other fights and Roy, sometimes you're frustrated and you will take any shot you can and you believe, I'm going to get away with it because it's only one time. I remember as an amateur, Jack, and I am not embarrassed to say this. I remember I fought a guy, Mike Cooley, one time, and he was giving me a hard time. When we touched gloves for the third round, I hit him with a right hand. I took my glove away and came over and hit him with a right hand. I wanted to take any shot I could take.
Teddy Atlas would say subconsciously you're trying to get out of the fight, to get disqualified.
And it's funny you say that, Jack. There's the one thing I do have a problem with Teddy Atlas. I think sometimes he tries to get in fighters' heads too much, and it bothered me for years that he said that George Foreman came back because he quit against Muhammad Ali and Zaire. George Foreman didn't quit against Ali. He tried to kill him. He ran out of gas, and that's all there was to it. He couldn't have continued. If there would have been a ninth round, Ali would have peppered the hell out of him.
Well, it sounds good, just like we hear the story. Well, Mike Spinks was scared to death of Mike Tyson. That's why he went out. Tyson was just far better.
And he had the style, Jack.
Spinks was interviewed recently, and he said he was quicker than all his opponents until he fought Tyson. He was in with a guy that was quicker than he was. He had no advantage in speed. And that last right hand Spinks threw against Tyson, that was a Spinks jinx right hand.
He was trying to get him off. There's no doubt about it.
Tyson was just quicker, more explosive.
I knew Michael Spinks, Jack. I don't know. I don't want to say he's afraid of him. I think he might have had trepidation, as to whether he could beat him. But I will say this. Michael Spinks, stylistically, does not match up with the Swarmer. Michael Spinks will give Ali and Holmes a lot of trouble and go rounds with them. But a guy like Smoking Joe Frazier or Mike Tyson, they will get inside, work his body, and beat him down. And that was just a very bad matchup for Michael Spinks at that time.
About a spotlight fighter, Frank.
Donald Curry. Jack, Donald Curry had about 400 amateur fights. He would have been our representative in the Olympic Games. However, we didn't go that year because the Russians invaded Afghanistan and we didn't participate in the 80 games. I believe Curry was favored to win the gold medal. At one time, I was a huge Donald Curry fan, Jack. I thought he was a little Joe Louis with his fundamentals and his basics. He had such a good style. He was a boxer puncher. He could jab. Every punch he threw was to set up the next. There was no wasted movement. He had power in both hands. He had a good defense. And for a while, a lot of people are going to laugh at this, but my good friends know that after he knocked out Milton McCrory in 1985 to unify the welterweight title, I remember saying to a couple buddies of mine, you know, I think Leonard and Hearns beat him at 147, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. And then he fights Lloyd Huntington in Atlantic City, and we found out he had trouble making weight. He had a substance issue. Huntington took it to him, beat him, and to me, Donald Curry was never the same after that. But for a 3-year period, from say 82 to 85, I thought he was on track to become an all-time great. He went through the division, and Jack, I'm going to tell you something, and a lot of guys listening to this are going to say, no, Frank, you hate Mayweather. I believe Donald Curry between 84 and 85 beats Mayweather at any weight or at any time in Mayweather's career at 147. But as we know, I'm glad he's in the Hall of Fame. He was recently inducted. You can't say he's an all-time great. He was on that track. He had everything, but at the end of the day, his dedication, his problem with weight, and maybe substance and some personal problems kept him from achieving his goal. But for his first, say, what do you have? What fight was it? His first.
Well, he had the 2 victories over Marlon Starling.
Right, and they were solid wins. For a while there, Jack, for 30 fights or so, he looked like he just was never going to lose.
And McCrory, against McCrory, he was sensational. He looked like really an all-time great. You know, something bothered me even when he was at his peak. I never liked his style. There was something about Curry, as great as he was.
My God, Jack, we're getting along tonight. I could have a big fight with you on that. Go ahead, tell me why.
Something that made him beatable to me. You know, he wasn't like a slick fighter who would move away, give angles and all. He basically moved forward, but would stay in the middle of the ring and would just beat guys on talent and timing. And something was bothering me about, you know, I know he turned in certain sensational performances, especially the second Starling fight, even though he won both fights on points. I know how good Starling was at his best, and Starling showed up in peak form, yet Curry still won with room to spare that fight. So he just showed how good he was. I know what you're saying if he fought a Mayweather at welterweight. Listen, the Mayweather at welterweight would lose rounds to Miguel Cotto, Marcus Maidana. Curry was better than those guys. So, you know, you want to slot Curry in instead of the other opponents. But if I slot Curry in for Diego Corrales, that type of fighter, Mayweather beats, you know, Curry, you know. But that was
I think there's a big difference between Corrales and Mayweather, Jack, or Corrales and Curry. And let me just say this. We really disagree on this one because to me, I think if you were going to show a young fighter on how to box and do things the way they're supposed to be done, no wasted movement, fundamentals, punch in between their punches, use subtle pressure, make them throw and counter. I think Curry was the textbook that way. I think the only thing that beat Curry, Jack, is what I said. Substance, weight, and personal problems, and the fact that I don't know how dedicated he was, but I actually loved his style, Jack. To me, he was a consummate boxer puncher, just like Alexis Arguello and Joe Louis.
He didn't stay on top quite long enough, and he got into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, but he wasn't a solid Hall of Famer. You know, he basically just got in there. If you look at it at his whole career, he didn't quite have the longevity.
No, he was on top for 3 years, but he had some good wins. Adolfo Vieira, Sterling. He won the title from that
Well, you know,
Hwang. Roger Stafford, he mutilated.
Right.
Nino LaRocca. Remember Lino LaRocca? They were calling him the next Ali. He was 58-1 when he fought him. He killed him.
We wouldn't do
Colin
that.
Jones, James Green, McCrory.
Yeah,
I think Curry Hall of Fame talent, resume, pretty good. He had some great wins, but he had some horrific losses.
He didn't quite get the second act. He loses to Hunnigan. He didn't come back with a vengeance, even though there was a lot left. He fights Mike McCallum. He wins 3 of the first 4 rounds. And then he gets
called with that left hook pulling out.
But McCallum wasn't a one-punch hitter. But who knows, had he not gotten caught, had he beaten the great Mike McCallum, wow, that would have elevated him even further. We would have looked back today and said he beat the great Mike McCallum, but he didn't quite get that.
But Jack, I do think McCallum got him at a time. The same thing with Usyk. I think he got Joshua at the right time when his confidence was on the way down. Usyk didn't fight the version of Joshua that Klitschko fought or that Dillian White fought, and I just think that Joshua after Klitschko was not the same guy. And as we saw in their last fight, had he been confident and believed in himself, he's capable of beating Usyk, but not the version that was knocked out by Ruiz and then almost stopped by Usyk in their first fight.
Frank, when are we going to start beating the drums for Canelo and Golovkin? Maybe next week's show, a couple of shows it's worth analyzing or what? Because there's a lot of action going on. Inoue, the great Japanese fighter, best bantamweight in the world. He's fighting Paul Butler for Butler's IBF belt. Inoue,
who has no notable names on his record.
Right, but the point is, this is why I hate these silly unification fights. I'm going to tell you why. Inoue is a sensational talent, but this gives him an excuse not to step up even further. Like to look at another opponent, maybe move up in weight, maybe Navarrete, moves down a weight division of the catch weight, and he, moves up a little. Just a thought. And Zurdo Ramirez against Dimitri Bivol in November. That's going to be a terrific fight. Terrific match.
That's a nice style clash, Jack, because you have an aggressive guy that likes to mix it up against a guy who will mix it up but prefers to box in Bivol. So there's a nice style clash there.
Frank, we have very little time, but I'm going to give you some of this time. One of your pet peeves is the way boxing shoots itself in the foot. We talked about Wilder, Helenius, okay? Devin Haney, George Kambosos is the same night. And listen, Kambosos, Haney is on ESPN.
I didn't realize that, Jack.
Who would want to pay the pay-per-view money for Wilder and Helenius if you could see the other for free on ESPN?
Well, let me ask you this. Which one will you watch?
I'll probably be a ringside for Wilder, Helenius, but I wouldn't pay the pay.
That's at the Barclays Center, right?
Barclays Center, but I wouldn't pay the pay-per-view price. I'm more interested. Which fight am I more interested in? I'm more interested in Haney Kambosos, the rematch.
Really?
Haney,
and I'm the complete opposite.
Okay.
Jack, I'm the complete opposite. We have a minute left. I am the complete opposite because I think Haney and Kambosos is going to be a rerun of the first fight. I'm very confident that Haney is going to win. Wilder and Helenius, because of what I said earlier in the show, I don't know what Wilder I'm getting. Helenius is a perfect style for him. I have more interest in that fight. Haney and Kambosos, I'm very, very confident on how that's going to go. To me, if Kambosos won, that would be a monumental upset.
Well, we'll have time to analyze that fight as we go along. Frank, was a blast like usual. Had a lot of fun.
Absolutely, Jack. Thanks to everybody for watching, and we'll see you soon.